Michael, I have to say, I picked up the book and I can't put it down. It's just been absolutely brilliant. It's like sort of watching one of your documentary makers in front of your very eyes. How do you approach these interviews? How do you get these people who are very well versed most of the time in dealing with press, either because they're very well protected or they know what they're doing? How do you get them to a point where you're not going to get the stock answers that they're given to everybody else?
That's a very good question. And the answer, I suppose, is um, I have more time than some of the other interviewers who are doing it live. When I'm making these documentaries, it takes about 4 months to make documentaries, and sometimes takes as much as 6 years to get them to agree to appear in them. It was like that with Boris. It was like that with Tony Blair when we made the documentary called News from Number 10, inside Number 10. So I think there are two things. One is that they know that I'm going to play fair, or I hope they know that it'll be, it will be a portrait, warts and all. But I won't use the techniques of television against them, which I think some people do. But the other thing is I take them back to various parts of their life, where they were born, where they grew up, where they went to school or university, and that spurs memories in them. I also have this technique of showing them bits of their early life on television. Many politicians talk a lot about television, but they have very little time to watch it. And certainly some of their recordings of their early life, they wouldn't have, they didn't see it at the time and haven't seen it since. And it just wakes them up. I remember when I was making a film about the former Tory Chancellor, Ken Clarke, I said, I'll be showing you these bits of films. And I just want you to sit here and act naturally. He said, you mean you want me to shout at the television like I do at home? I said, that's about it. You've got it in one.
Your book beautifully sort of almost describes the age that television made its way into politics. And I was wondering if you could tell us about how you came into the possession of Sir Winston Churchill, who famously didn't give interviews for television. He wasn't a big fan for television, but there is footage of him doing what someone might call a screen test for television.
Yeah, a secret screen test, absolutely. I mean, Churchill hated the idea of television. He was never, as Prime Minister, ever interviewed on television. But in 1953, at the time of the coronation, when the Queen's coronation was televised against the wishes of Winston Churchill, he suddenly saw that television could be this really powerful medium. He had said before that television was just a tuppenny halfpenny Punch and Judy show, the idiot's lantern. But he could see that it would be some, and he said it would never have any part to play in politics. But he could see, with the sales of sets doubling almost every week for people to watch the coronation, he thought he should have a go at it himself. And his broadcasting officer, a woman called a woman who was she wanted to have a screen test made of him to see what he would look like on television, and in great secrecy. She was called Winifred Crumb Ewing. That's what they were called in those days.
What a name. Great name.
And we went we were making a film about television and Number 10, and we went to see Mrs. Crumb Ewing. Unfortunately, in her hospital bed, she was ill. She was quite old by then, and we told her what we were doing, and she said, "You look a very nice young man. I'll give you the keys of my house, and if you go to the first floor, you can see under the bed is my bedroom. You'll see a box, and in the box is something which says Churchill screen test. You're welcome to have it."
Gosh.
And she arranged this screen test, and Churchill, it's an amazing piece of film to see, because he says, "I'm sorry to have to descend to this level, but we all have to see, all have to see what we can make of modern inventions. So I've consented to have this exhibition made. I'm very sorry to have to descend to this level, but we all have to see what this thing they call TV is." When he said this thing they call TV, he made it sound like a kind of transmittable sexual disease or something like that. But when Mrs. Crumb Ewing showed him the screen test that she'd filmed, he just ordered her to destroy it, and she thought it was a historic document and kept it under her bed for all those years until we came to see her.
Another line that struck out from your book, and as I was reading it in bed, and I had to scramble for a pencil just to make a note next to it. But again, it involves.
Very exciting.
I'm loving this book, I tell you. But it has to do with Clement Attlee.
Yes.
Taking the view that it would have been better if TV had never been invented. It was, he said, nothing more than an idiot's lantern that would turn politicians into entertainers. And I can't help but think of Matt Hancock in The Jungle right now.
It shows you how percipient Clement Attlee was. Yes, exactly. That whole argument and that relationship between entertainment and politics, and entertainers and politicians seeking to get some of the stardust of entertainers rubbing off on there, like Harold Wilson giving MBs to the Beatles, that kind of thing. And Mrs. Thatcher, who was the person that she, for a long time, would invite to Christmas and then gave a knighthood to Jimmy Savile. There's a danger of politicians mixing showbiz and entertainment with politics.
Michael, I've got to ask you about Mrs. Thatcher and the flirting. What happened there?
I joined the 1979 election, the election that she won that made her prime minister. I was making a film about her campaign, and I said to her in an interview, I said, "I've been following you during this campaign, and there sometimes seemed to me to be two Mrs. Thatchers. The one doing the walkabouts and on the factory floor, talking to the workers and endlessly interested in the minutiae of their lives, and the other on the conference platform full of passionate rhetoric. How many Mrs. Thatchers are there?" And she said, "Oh, 3 at least." And at this stage, she'd had these voice lessons to bring her voice down and to sound more sexy. And she said, "Oh, 3 at least." I said, "What are the 3? And she said, "There's the intellectual one, there's the intuitive one, and there's the one at home." And she said it in such a flirtatious way that the Robin Day, who was watching the interview go out, said to the people in the studio, "The untold story of the election campaign, Margaret Thatcher is having an affair with Michael Cockerell." But she could be herself. When I would go and interview her in Number 10, wearing my best silk tie, and she would come to me and said, "Mr. Cockerell, what a lovely tie, lovely tie." See, it was quite interesting when you would go to see her in her den, and she would come like, because you're always at a disadvantage because you're going there into her house to ask her questions which she may not like.